Welcome to No CS Create, the show where I talk to developers that are self-taught or have been to coding bootcamp. I'm joined today by Pauline Narvas, who is a developer from the UK. How's it going?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, no worries. Your
Yes.
career seems to be flourishing very nicely.
Oh.
You've moved from doing more UI work to doing DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to be talking about how you learn to code without a CS degree and your various impressive career achievements today.
Oh, thank you.
No worries. So start off, you don't have a CS degree or a master's or PhD in rocket science or anything
No,
like
rocket
that.
science, no.
So,
Unfortunately not.
yeah, there's still time. How did you get into coding originally then?
Oh, I love this question. I could literally talk about this forever. But basically, it all started when I was quite young. I used to enjoy creating little websites when I was around 8 years old. This was 2003, 2004, 2005, something like that. During that time, I just enjoyed creating websites for my own it was like my own online diary. So I used to blog even then, and back then blogging had a completely different term. It was mostly personal blogging, where people would be like, today I saw a turtle and it was really cool. So I used to post stuff like that. And so as part of that, I wanted to create a website that housed that blog, but also I used to enjoy creating fan sites as well. So I used to love High School Musical. I had a phase. To be honest, I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm still in the phase now. But I used to create all these different websites, and that was me completely just playing around with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because back then there wasn't really all these amazing courses that you could take, and so it was literally me spending hours on the computer, removing different tags, trying out different things, removing different elements from the style sheet, and just seeing what happens. And it was really, really cool. It was a lot of exploring and trial and error. And then eventually when I went to school, it was time to choose my career. And I still think it's quite early for anyone to be subjected to what should you be doing for the next 20 years, but that is the system, isn't it? And so I ended up choosing going down the medical field because my parents really wanted to have a doctor in the family, and they sort of pushed me into it because they were like, it's a really stable job, it's a stable field. And I just sort of went with it, and then I ended up going to university, and I studied biomedical sciences because, fun fact, I failed my medical exam to get into medicine. and so that's why I went to do biomed, because then there's an opportunity to do the biomed degree and then move on to medicine. But I ended up just doing biomed, and then it wasn't until my second year at university where I realized that this isn't for me, and I was genuinely pushed into it. And even though I find a lot of interest in certain things like human biology, for example, how diseases affect us and stuff like that, I just didn't have that much of a passion for it. And luckily around that time I discovered the community at Sheffield University, which is the university I went to. They had a community called Code First Girls, and they were looking for a few female students to go onto their course to learn the basics of web development. And I'm actually wearing their hoodie right now. I'm repping them every day.
Swag.
It's so good.
Cool.
Yeah. So and then they were like, we need some students. I went in despite already knowing some of the basics, but that was where I found my love for tech. That was where I connected with other women who were also interested in in tech, and it just blew my mind that you could actually do this, and that there was a place for me because I could see there was a lot of other female developers in the room. I was like, oh my god, this is a career path. And so for my remaining time at university, I sort of pursued this on the side. So I continued with my degree, in biomed. I did all the courses, did my dissertation. But then on the side, I worked with Code First Girls, helping teach more women across the university how to code. So that was covering things like HTML, CSS, Git, JavaScript, Bootstrap, and stuff like that. And I did that for the next 3 years at university. And around the same time, I found a lot of tech community groups around locally in my local area. And they just opened my mind to what is possible. And so by the time I finished and graduated from the university with my biomed degree, with my piece of paper, woo, I graduated. I'm probably not going to use this. But after I graduated from that, I was looking at jobs and next steps. And I interviewed at quite a few places, like startups, big companies, big tech, for several different roles. And then I eventually landed a spot on the BT graduate scheme. And for those who don't know, BT are a huge telecommunications company here in the UK. And they have different engineering hubs. And one of the engineering hubs that I applied to was in Leeds, which is local to, it was close by to Sheffield. And so I ended up moving to Leeds after I graduated. And then I entered tech that way. And then I did a 2-year graduate scheme, which enabled me to really understand what working in tech is like. Because when I was part of all these community groups, I heard from a lot of speakers who were working in the industry, and I got a good idea of what it was like to work there. But nothing ever prepares you for your first job, and then you're actually sat there, you're actually going through the motions. And so I'm really, to this day, I'm still very grateful to BT for the opportunity. And so, I did 2 years, 4 different rotations, because it was a graduate scheme. So I did different rotations between different teams. And the 4 rotations I did was in I learned things like architecture, front end development, and which was something I was already sort of good at already, because I've been hobbies and Code First Girls communities and stuff like that. And then eventually my 3rd and 4th rotation introduced me to the world of DevOps and site reliability engineering and all that cool stuff, and the cloud. And then I found out about AWS and all that cool stuff. And that's sort of how I landed my new job, which I started just this year in January 2021, where I am a DevOps engineer now. And it's been such a journey, because I've gone from, learning the basics of front-end development in my own time as a hobby, creating those fan sites, to then learning more about React, modern frameworks and stuff like that through just communities and, experimenting in my own time. And then I got into the grad scheme, and then I got introduced to a whole world of enterprise tech and all sorts of stuff, and then DevOps and cloud, which is where I am now. So I feel like I'm sort of everywhere in tech, but right now I'm trying to focus on DevOps, and I still look at other technologies, but right now my focus is in DevOps and cloud. So that's me. Wow. That's how I got into tech.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So you're talking about Code First Girls. I think on the blog interview you did on nodejs3.com, you were saying that I think when you're at school, you're maybe in a classroom where it's only boys, and it's you for learning I guess computing or whatever you'd call it in school nowadays.
Yeah.
But obviously Code First Girls is totally different because you're surrounded by women. So how important was that for you?
Oh my gosh, it was so important. So just for a bit of context for those who haven't read the article, but basically I did a GCSE in computing. I think nowadays it's called computer science. Maybe, I don't even know what it's called nowadays. But so I did that, and I was in a room of just mostly boys. And I remember I had comments thrown at me you should be in textiles. Textiles is upstairs, go and do art or something. And and it was really off-putting. And so when you're in that environment, you obviously don't feel welcome. So you don't, when I was choosing my subjects, and my parents were you should go and do this medical degree or go into biomed, and I saw more women in it doing those subjects, I was okay, because at least when I'm in biology, no one like says mean things to me. You know what I mean? I just get on with it, and no one judges me or anything or tries to exclude me. And so that's sort of another reason like that motivated me to go down that path. And so it is really, really important. And it wasn't until I met the Code First Girls community, it opened so many doors for me. But also, I think the most important thing that I got from Code First Girls is that community aspect, and actually realizing that there is space for women like me, people who look like me in technology. And it's not just like, that horrible experience that in that computing class. And so it is really important to be able to see people who are similar to you in the place you're working, or an industry that interests you. And that's why I'm so like involved in diversity and inclusion initiatives across the board. I think if you're on Twitter and you look at all these like diversity inclusion stuff, I'm probably there. I'm probably like an active member of something. It's just because I like surrounding myself with those types of people, because it reminds me that there is a place for me in tech. And I'm glad that it's improving day by day, I want to say, but there is still a lot of work to be done. But yeah, that's what Code First Girls taught me, and I'm forever grateful for them for that.
That totally makes sense. And I can see as well what you were saying about choosing biomed, because that doesn't sound like a fun experience surrounded by people saying, why are you here?
Yeah, why are you here? So, exactly. Like, I'm already doubting myself. Like, why do I need you to add to the fire? You know what I mean?
How's it been learning DevOps? Because you did like the AWS exams.
Yes.
Been like keeping track of your career on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thanks for being so invested as me. Like.
No worries. Well, this is how I find my podcast and YouTube.
Yeah, that's like,
it. Tell me, like, how was it learning that?
Yeah. So again, like I mentioned, I was part of a graduate scheme with BT, which again, very, very grateful for, because it opened my eyes to a lot of different areas of tech that I think when you first, get into tech, a lot of people sort of, when you ask yourself, okay, I want to get into tech, what should I go into? People sort of throw front-end development, create a website. And I understand why people go for that first, because you have that visual aid to like show you when you're coding something, you have something visual to say, okay, that's what that line of code did. And so I understand why people like go towards that. And so that's sort of where like I came from as well. That's why I got into tech, because I started playing around with bits of code, and then I saw a visual thing, and it felt really good to be able to see what I worked on. And so when I got into my grad scheme, I already sort of had this idea in mind. I was like, I want to be a software engineer focusing on UI development. I already know this is what I want to do. But I said to myself, this grad scheme is a good idea just to like see what else is out there, just in case maybe UI development isn't what I actually want to do. And so I tried to go in with an open mind. But if I'm being really honest with you, I already had a job in mind, and I was just going to go through the motions, go through the grad scheme, and then by the end of it, try and get a job as a front-end developer or software engineer. I was already sort of set in my ways. But then when it got to my third rotation in my second year of the graduate scheme, I was looking at all the different teams, and I was like, what can I go into now? And I had to choose something, and I almost went to another team that was, again, they needed a UI developer. So I nearly went into that because it was what I was comfortable in. But then I was like, oh, this sounds interesting, DevOps. Like, I joined a team called Platform Services. I was like, I don't really understand what Platform Services is. I don't understand what they mean by a platform, stuff like that. And so I was like, you know what? It's only 6 months of my graduate scheme, because that's how the rotations work. You move from one team to the other, and they all last 6 months. So I was like, 6 months of my life, why not? Let's give it a go. And so I threw myself into that. And the first few weeks was very difficult. Like going from someone who's a very visual person to then like looking at a terminal from 9 to 5 and being like, what the hell is going on? And navigating different virtual machines. I like in my brain, I just couldn't imagine it, because all my life I've been like aligning divs and trying to center divs and trying to like color different backgrounds and stuff. So I just didn't know about all this stuff. And so it was really tough. But then the more I pushed through it, the more I was like, wow, this is actually interesting. Like in that rotation, I learned things like AWS, like learning about how virtual machines live in the cloud, and things like other technologies like Terraform that provision those machines in the cloud. So then I started to understand the whole concept of infrastructure as code, which is essentially just, you're creating your like web servers or a database servers and whatever, but you just specify it in like a file, like in a Terraform file or whatever, and then you run a command and it creates it on AWS or Google Cloud Platform or whatever. You can do it in like minutes. And that blew my mind. When I started to think about it a bit more, I was like, oh my God, can you imagine how fast it would be to deploy all of these services? It like as a large enterprise or even a startup, can you imagine if you could like put all of the infrastructure that you have in as code and then deploy it everywhere, like infinitely? I was like, it just blew my mind. And then the more I dug into that, it's amazing. And the more I dug into that, and the more I dug into like things about learning about Linux systems, SSHing into different machines, and like just learning all these different Linux commands, I felt like a hacker, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. And eventually, like over the 6 months, I started looking at terminal. And then I remember there was at one point I was doing like a side project where I was rebuilding my portfolio, and I looked at React again, and I was so frustrated because I couldn't do something on like the style sheets, and I was like, oh, it's so annoying. I don't know. And sort of my brain switched from thinking very much on the UI side of things to like thinking about the back end. How does this fit in with this, and how does it talk to each other, rather than just focusing on like the front end? And it just blew my mind. And that like switch in my brain, ever since, I've just been sort of almost addicted to understanding all the different pieces and how they speak to each other. And now I've moved into a new company. It's been interesting to understand how all these different microservices work, and how like using technologies like Kubernetes or Chef for more legacy systems, how they work to like sort of command the servers that we have, and how to fix problems and just stuff like that. And there's been times where I, during my time at BT and my current place, I've been like digging in systems, trying to find the different problems, and it's become like a puzzle that I love. I just love to solve. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but it's different to like the front end side of things. And so I just threw myself in that, and now I'm like, I absolutely love it, and it's just opened my mind to all the different possibilities that there are in tech, especially like AWS. Like I could talk about AWS for like hours, but like I won't. But yeah, AWS, that's a whole different thing. But it's amazing what you could do in the cloud, and what AWS have provided in terms of like products and services for developers, for enterprises to like get up and get started and get going, to really speed up that process of getting their products into market or whatever. It's just so inspiring. It's so great. And as part of like the AWS learning, I did 2 certifications for it. So I did the certified cloud practitioner, which is like the foundational cert, and then late last year I did my AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam, which focuses more on all the different services across AWS, and how, if you were like a solutions architect, how would they speak to each other, and how would you design certain systems? So if you had like a 3-tier system, how would they all talk to each other? So I learned so much from that, and I'm just getting started as well. So it's just cool. I've been DevOps for, just as a disclaimer, I've been in DevOps for like about a year and a half now, so still a lot to learn, but super exciting. Sorry if I went off there. You could tell how passionate about I am about this subject.
No, that's cool. I was gonna ask though, do you think you're someone that just likes learning in general? Like you just
Yeah.
soaking things up like a sponge?
Oh yeah.
Because yeah.
I think that's why I loved my graduate scheme, because every 6 months I could jump to the next thing and I could learn something else. And I think that's why I sort of like DevOps, because I'm constantly learning something new, like every single day. And I'm sure, like, I'm not saying that I know everything about UI development and modern web applications. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, it's sort of activated the different aspects of my brain. And then now I'm just sort of obsessed with like learning about it, you know?
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the really good things about coding, well, it depends how you view things, but I think there's always going to be new things to learn, and it's a fast moving field. And there's things that, like, for instance, on the front end, maybe like 5 years ago, it'd be totally enough to just know like jQuery, or for instance.
Yes.
And that was like 10 years ago, that was like mind blowing, and that like changed so many websites and so many developers. Now everyone's using things like React and like modern frameworks. So I think if you like learning and you like discovering new things, tech is brilliant.
Yes.
Because there's lots of jobs where, if you're a lawyer, you're going to do the same job pretty much for your whole career.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, I mean, obviously you have to track changes in the law, but it's not things like you're not going to have to learn a completely new legal system or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like tech does offer a lot more if you're very intellectually curious.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be great to hear like how you felt kind of transitioning from being a junior developer to more of a kind of like mid-level role.
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. Yeah. So like I said, I was on that graduate scheme, and throughout the 2 years on that grad scheme, it was very much, I was definitely like junior, and I needed that support to, sort of get myself up to speed. And I'm still trying to like get to grips with the differences between being a junior and mid, and trying to like say it and describe it in a way that would make sense, because for me, it's like a really subtle thing. And I've asked this on Twitter before, I think. I've asked, like, how do you know when you've moved from a junior to a mid, apart from, like, the massive pay rise and someone telling you that you are now a mid-level, you are now in the mid-level role? Because if I'm being honest with you, I still sometimes feel that almost like imposter syndrome, that I'm still, like, junior, but, like, people have been saying you are mid-level, like this role is mid-level that you have taken up. And yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around that. But I think the main differences for me is I'm a lot more like independent now, and I'm a lot more like, if someone gives me a task to do, like I pick up a ticket in from our board, I sort of like read it, I sort of like understand the technologies that are involved, the files that I need to edit, the changes that I have to make, and the systems that it affects. So I have that much more overall awareness of how this technology fits into the service that I'm looking at, or fits into an organizational service or product or whatever. And so that's sort of like where my head's at now. I'm sort of thinking more about like how that all fits in. How does the technology that I'm like coding away, how does that fit into the wider thing, and like how does that again fit in to the wider business, if that makes sense. Whereas when you're a junior, I don't know if this is just a unique experience from my side, but when I was a junior, I was mostly focused on like me. I was focused on like my learning. So when I was going through courses, I was like, okay, I'm learning AWS. I'm going to get this AWS certification and it looks great on me, but I wouldn't really understand how to apply that knowledge I just learned from that cert into real life. And so it took a bit longer for me to understand the link. So I could like, this is again maybe another topic, but people tend to go through course after course after course after course, and it's all great. You've completed all these Udemy courses, but then the proper test to see if you actually understand and you got a good grasp of what you learned from those courses, is to apply it to like maybe a system at work or like a side project or whatever. And I think that's sort of what the jump was for me. So I went from like, okay, I need to learn all these technologies, learning all these technologies, to then knowing the technologies, being able to write stuff from scratch. And if a ticket is sent my way, I'm like, yeah, I have a general idea of how to tackle this, and I can then relate it back to our own systems, rather than just like, oh, let me complete this ticket that uses this specific technology and then move it, and then that's it, if that makes sense. Whereas when I became like more of a mid-level role, I've started to understand how everything sort of like fits together. And I think that is the main thing. But to be honest with you, I started my mid-level job this year, and I'm still like trying to get to grips with everything. And like I said, the transition is really strange to me, and I don't know. It's like I always ask senior engineers, when do you know you're a senior? And they can't answer it either, because it's such a tough question. I don't know. Yeah. But that would be my answer, I think, for that one.
Okay, nice one. Yeah, I mean, I think like it's really good to hear about what you're saying about Udemy courses, because like they are a great way to learn. Although I think like a lot of people, it's very easy to like snag all of them when they're on sale. Special note, never buy Udemy course at full price. It will be on sale tomorrow. So,
yeah, it will, exactly.
For like $15 instead of $200. So, but yeah, I guess there's a common thing where it's like, you know, tutorial help, where people are like, okay, I'll just buy another course. So yeah, I guess your advice is kind of like use what you've learned to kind of make something from scratch.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the more independent you become, you jump from that like junior way of thinking to more of a like, oh yeah, cool. Like I know if someone gives me this problem, like create a website and deploy it serverlessly or whatever, then what would you do? And you'd sort of like start to add all the pieces together. Anyway, that is my experience from like going from junior to mid. But I guess it really depends on the person. So
yeah, definitely. Another thing I should ask is, when you're doing your interview for your current company, I mean, were they totally cool with you being self-taught? You don't have a computer science degree or anything like that. You got a biomed degree. Were they cool with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really refreshing nowadays to see more companies not have that requirement. But yeah, when I interviewed, they didn't even ask. Like, you know, when I introduced myself in the interview, I would talk about my degree, and I would be like, yeah, I did a biomed degree, just to make sure that they're aware of what they're sort of expecting from me. And most of the time when I've taught in interviews and I've said I have a biomed degree, no one says anything about it. They're just like, okay, cool, awesome. Yeah. And then they move on to my experience, my actual hands-on experience as as an engineer, and they go from there. Yeah. So
that's really cool. I should plug as well, if you're looking for a job and you don't have a CS degree, check out nocsok.com, which is the sister site to No CS Degree. I share tons of jobs every week that don't require degrees. Sorry?
I've had a browse myself.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
that's
they're
really
great.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's really cool. Like, whenever someone gets a job from the mailing list, it's super nice. I've had people message me being like, oh yeah, I got a job now from it. So yeah, nocsok.com. And yeah, moving on, I was just wondering if you could talk about blogging as a developer. A massive like Pandora's box I've just opened. But I guess more specifically, you've got a job at a company, but you're also blogging as a developer. Like, specifically, how do you approach that, and how do you feel about that? Because some people might be like, oh, I don't want to blog about, I don't know, self-doubt as a developer. Well, these people next to me are paying me a lot of money to be a developer. So anything you can talk to us about that?
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. First and foremost, like on my blog, I am very honest about a lot of things. And I tend to say, like, I have a podcast as well, and my intro is, I am a professional oversharer, because I am. But I sort of don't have that shame in that, because I think I don't know, I genuinely believe, and I've always held this belief, that you need to be as authentic as you can online, because there's not many people that who is. A lot of people, you know, put on a show, and that's great for them, it works for them, whatever. But I feel like more and more people nowadays are starting to suss those people out, and people are craving more of those genuine connections and those genuine people. And so I try to be as authentic as possible on my blog. And so if I'm experiencing imposter syndrome and I want to write about it, and I write a blog post about it, I share it on LinkedIn, where I'm connected to a lot of my professional network, then I'm sort of fine with it. And it might just be like a personal value of mine just to be as honest as possible. And so I tend not to care as much, just because like I am just trying to be as authentic as possible. And I tend to go towards the companies that sort of align with my values. And so if I would never want to work at a place where they say, no, you can't experience imposter syndrome. No, you can't like doubt yourself, blah, blah, blah. Because it's a human thing to doubt yourself. And, you know, so that's why I do try to like blog as authentically as possible. But in terms of like my approach to like creating like content in general and views from my employer, the first thing is, when I was at BT, there were several occasions where I told myself, if I was writing about BT, for example, which I have done quite a few times actually on my blog. If you are interested on the grad scheme, I wrote about my full experience there over the 2 years in a specific category, if anyone wants to deep dive on that. But when I would talk about something specifically to BT, we have a social media policy. And I remember going into that policy, rereading it, just making sure that what I create doesn't like upset anyone and doesn't upset or, you know, break some sort of company policy. And so far in my current job and at BT, I read through it and nothing like that said, no, you can't blog about, or you can't post about the company on social media, or you can't share your experience or whatever. And so there is that factor. So if anyone's like a engineer or a developer looking to start creating content or writing blog posts about their experiences as a developer, I would say first make sure that you check your company's policy just to make sure it all aligns with like I don't know if this is like if this is like an occurrence anywhere, but maybe some companies don't like it when you post about them. Maybe it's completely banned. So again, that's something you just need to make sure that you read and you're very clear about before you start posting content, because the last thing you want is some like, I don't know, repercussions from posting about your journey or whatever. But you know what, so far I've not heard that at all. So yeah, but it's still important to like double check and just like blog as authentically as possible. Like I think my general rule of thumb is if I'm not like upsetting anyone and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, including the company, then it's fine with me. And I've had conversations with managers before who have managed me and my current manager as well, and they're all happy with me to continue writing about my experiences and writing about you know, things I've learned and stuff like that, and it's completely fine with them. So again, it might differ company to company, but that's something that you should just like bear in mind. And yeah, I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I guess I've heard like of certain American companies where they're like,
really?
I mean, our American friends are quite litigious, so definitely maybe check if you're an American about blogging. I know like one or two companies that I won't name are like, oh, you can't talk about politics, or you can't.
Oh yes, I've heard that.
But I think I would say definitely check with the company if you're working there. But I would suspect if you're talking about coding and it's not like dreadfully like controversial, they'll probably be fine.
Yeah, and also it's not like you're like copying and pasting your company's code base and putting it live on the blog. Like, don't do that. There's a sense of common sense that you sort of have to. Like,
here are the security flaws for our company's website.
Let me tell you all about it.
Here's the back door to our website where you can like download the database and leak our customer data. So not that. Yeah, I was just wondering from your kind of past UI work, do you have any like special tips finding design inspiration or like improving your design skills as a developer?
That is such a good question, and I wish I could give you like the best answer for that. But most of my
That's why
design,
you're here. You have to get the best
I wish I could, but it's like, you know what? I feel like, you know what? Out of everything I experienced imposter syndrome over, design is my biggest like imposter syndrome. Like I feel like a massive fraud just because all of the stuff that I've ever designed, it usually goes through my little brother. My little brother, he's a lot younger than me, but he's really into tech. He's really into design, and whenever I need something designing, I ask for his help because he has like the eye. You know, he has like this eye for like how the colors work together and how things should be placed. So normally, like my blog, Pauline.com, spelled PAWLEAN.com, that design was like, I had a general idea of where I wanted to put the different elements, but then my brother came in and he was like, actually, you should like make this more bold. You should add this feature onto your website for accessibility, different colors, different like styles. He's the one who like designs all my stuff, so I'm terrible at that. Maybe my advice would be like find a friend who's good at this. Friend or family who's good at it, and then get inspiration from them.
No, I mean, like I ask for people for help all the time, like as a developer and entrepreneur, which I think is actually like, it's a really good advantage because I guess some people maybe don't like asking for help, or they're like, for whatever reason, asking people that are good at design for help would be, that's a good tip.
That's where I get my inspiration. So
nice one. I was just gonna like end the show with a few questions. Quick fire. Who's your favorite developer on YouTube?
Oh my god, that's such a quick. I'm scared now. Okay, so if I think right now, I'll name two. The first person that I've been learning a lot from in my DevOps journey is Tech World with Nina or Nana. Sorry if I said her name wrong. And she's really good. She goes through DevOps tips and has several different courses coming out, and it's really, really, really good. And then the second person is Temi. And her YouTube channel, I think, is Simple Code X or Simple X Code. And she is a former BT grad colleague, and she is like fantastic. I think you interviewed her, but she's fantastic. And she's been like, she's on YouTube, and she's been sharing her journey into tech. And I love her videos. I love how they're created. I love how like I relate to a lot of them, and I love all the content that she puts out. So yeah, those are my top two. I'm so sorry if I butchered the names.
Hey, they're not my names. I don't care.
I'll send them to you somehow. Yeah.
Favorite course? Like if you had to recommend, someone doesn't have CS degree, they want to learn to code. Favorite course? My
favorite course of all time. A Cloud Guru, getting into the cloud. They have a course called Intro to Cloud Computing or something like that, and I love that course. And if people who are interested in not just like front end development and stuff like that and more into the cloud and DevOps, A Cloud Guru courses are the way to go, and that one in particular really helped me. So yeah, those ones.
Awesome. And finally, favorite developer to follow on Twitter?
Can I say me?
Yeah, sure.
No, okay. No, I'm kidding. Let me think of someone. Oh my god. I'm on Twitter like right now, just quickly checking. My favorite developer has to be, you know what? I'm gonna drop. You know what? Someone I actually really enjoy following is Jennifer Opal. And I don't know if you've heard of her before, but the reason I like following her on Twitter is she's very open about her whole journey into tech and how she's figuring things out. And she's also a DevOps engineer. And I think I just relate a lot to her story. So yeah, I enjoy following her, and I enjoy like reading her tweets all the time. So
nice one. Yeah, the name rings a bell. So if I don't follow her already, I'll follow her now.
Yes, definitely. Nice you have to.
Awesome. That's cool. Okay, thanks a lot for being on the show. Just to finish off, where can people find out more about you?
So if you go on my website, paulinenarvas.com, you can pretty much find all the links on there. So my Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, blog, GitHub, if you want to look at my code, it's all there. So yeah, that's probably the best place to go first, and that should lead you to all the different places that I exist on the internet.
Awesome. And what's your Twitter username?
My Twitter username is Paulina, but it's spelled like, oh my god, it's so hard. I don't even know. I need to change that Twitter username, but it's Pauliennuh. Paulina.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. I've got friends that have got Twitter names that are just like completely random that they just chose when they were a teenager.
Yeah,
and now they're just stuck with it.
Yeah, so that's the reason for my username as well. I've had it for so long that I have an emotional attachment and I can't remove it.
Fair play. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again for being on the show. It's been great chatting to you. You can also check this out on nocsdegree.com, where I've interviewed over 100 developers about learning to code, all without a CS degree. So yeah, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.